My name is Eleanor Vance, and I have lived my 56 years by the quiet rhythms of the sea. My home, a small cedar-shingled cottage nestled in the woods of Port Blossom, has been my sanctuary since my husband, David, passed away 2 decades ago. From my kitchen window, I can see the deep, moody blue of the Puget Sound, and most mornings, I watch the Seattle-bound ferry slice through the mist, a distant vessel carrying people to lives much louder and faster than my own. For 25 years, I was the head librarian for our small community, a keeper of stories, a custodian of quiet worlds bound in paper and ink. My own story, I thought, had been written long ago. I was a widow, a librarian, and most importantly, a mother. The first tremor in that foundation, the first sign that my primary role was being retired without my consent, arrived on a damp Tuesday in early April. It came in an envelope of thick, creamy cardstock, its weight a stark contrast to the flimsy utility bills and grocery flyers it was sandwiched between. The calligraphy was exquisite, a flourish of shimmering silver ink. I slid it open with the silver letter opener David had given me for our 5th anniversary, a small, elegant seabird. Mr. and Mrs. Marcus Davenport request the pleasure of your company at the marriage of their daughter, Chloe, and to Mr. Ethan David Vance. I had to read my son's name twice. Ethan. My Ethan. Getting married. I sank onto the worn wooden stool in my kitchen, the invitation resting on the butcher block counter beside a bowl of lemons. He hadn't called. He hadn't driven the 45 minutes and taken the ferry to tell me in person, to let me see the joy in his eyes. There was no shared moment of excitement, no story of the proposal, no introduction to this decision that would reshape his life, and, by extension, my own. There was only this formal, impersonal summons, as if I were a business associate he was obligated to invite to a corporate gala. Ethan was 29, a rising star at a Seattle tech firm called Ethelred Analytics. He lived in a minimalist condo in South Lake Union with views of the Space Needle and a concierge who knew his coffee order. I had been there once, for a brief, stilted tour. His fiancée, Chloe, was the daughter of a prominent surgeon. I'd met her twice. The first time was for a brunch at a sterile, glass-walled restaurant where the menu had no prices and the water was served in what looked like a science beaker. The second was at Christmas, a brief stop at my cottage where Chloe had remained near the door, clutching her designer handbag as if my home's comfortable, book-scented air might tarnish it. She was beautiful, polished, and radiated an unnerving, glossy perfection. The wedding was to be held on June 21st, the summer solstice, at the Whispering Pines Golf and Country Club on the mainland. Black tie, it commanded in small, severe print at the bottom. Not optional. A mandate. I didn't own a single thing that could be mistaken for black tie. My nicest dress was a simple linen sheath I'd bought for a library fundraiser 5 years prior. I held the invitation, my thumb tracing the cool, raised lettering of Ethan's name. A tide of conflicting emotions washed over me, a swell of pride for the man he had become, so successful and sure of himself, immediately followed by the sharp, receding undertow of rejection. I was his mother. I had packed his lunches, proofread his essays, and held his hand in the emergency room after he fell from a tree. I had celebrated his triumphs and absorbed his sorrows, and now, for the most significant milestone of his adult life, I was being informed via mail. That evening, I gathered my courage and called him. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up, his voice breathless and preoccupied. "Hey, Mom, can I call you back? I'm in the middle of something." "I just got the invitation, honey," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "It's beautiful." "Oh, great. Glad it got there." He sounded like he was ticking an item off a to-do list. "Congratulations," I continued, forcing a warmth I didn't feel. "Chloe is a wonderful young woman. I'm so happy for you both." There was a beat of silence, filled with the faint clicking of a keyboard on his end. "Yeah, she's the best. Listen, Mom, about the wedding." My heart gave a hopeful leap. Here it was. The inclusion. I would be honored to help in any way I can, I said, my imagination already picturing us. Maybe I could help choose the reading for the ceremony, or bake the lemon and elderflower cake he'd loved since he was a boy. I know how much work these things are. Mom, no. Stop. The words were gentle but firm, a door quietly closing in my face. It's all handled. The Davenports have a wedding planner. She's a professional. Of course, I said, the hopeful feeling deflating. I didn't mean financially, Ethan. I just meant I'd like to be a part of it. To be involved. A mother-son dance, perhaps? Helping you with your vows. A heavy sigh came through the phone. It was a sound I knew well, the sound of his patience wearing thin. We're not really doing a lot of that traditional stuff. Chloe's family is, well, their traditions are a little different. And the dance floor is going to be more of a party vibe, you know? Not really set up for slow dances. He paused. Look, can you just come and have a good time? Wear something nice. Something classic. Chloe's mom is very particular about the aesthetic. The aesthetic. The word hung in the air between us, cold and foreign. Something nice, I repeated, my voice a near whisper. I understand. I wouldn't want to clash with the decor. It's not like that, he said quickly, defensively. I've got to run. Chloe and I have a tasting menu to approve. Talk soon. The line went dead. I stood in the profound silence of my cottage, the only sound the rhythmic sigh of the waves against the shore. I looked at the invitation again, its silver letters mocking me with their promise of pleasure and company. I was being summoned not as a mother, but as a spectator. An audience member with a seat in the back row. And in that quiet, aching moment, a new feeling began to seed itself in the well-tended soil of my heart. It was not anger, not yet. It was resolve. If I was to be a guest, then I would be a guest of immense and quiet dignity. If I was to be a stranger at my only son's wedding, I would be the most elegant stranger in the room. The next morning, I began. I walked to the Port Blossom Community Bank and spoke to a teller about opening a separate savings account. For the next 2.5 months, my life became an exercise in frugal devotion. I stopped buying paperbacks, borrowing them from my own library instead. I canceled my modest subscription to a classical music streaming service and listened to the radio. I learned to love lentil soup and homemade bread. I picked up extra shifts cataloging a new donation at the library, my evenings spent in the dusty, peaceful silence of the archives. Every extra dollar, every saved coin, went into that account. It was a quiet rebellion, a secret act of self-anointment. By early June, I had saved nearly $1,000. It felt like a fortune. I took the ferry to Seattle on a rare sunny Saturday and walked, not to the department stores I knew, but to a small, independent boutique I'd only ever admired from the outside. The bell above the door chimed a delicate, welcoming note. A kind woman with silver hair pinned in a loose bun and a tape measure draped around her neck greeted me. "Can I help you find something special?" she asked, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "I'm the mother of the groom," I said, and the words felt both proud and hollow. "The wedding is black tie." She led me through racks of silks and velvets. My fingers, used to the feel of worn book spines and garden soil, trembled slightly as they brushed against the fine fabrics. And then I saw it. It wasn't black. It was the color of the midnight sky just before the stars appear, a deep, luminous lapis lazuli. It was a simple, floor-length gown with a graceful bateau neckline and long, slender sleeves. It was modest, but not matronly. It was timeless. When I stepped out of the dressing room, the woman clasped her hands together. "Oh, my dear," she breathed. "That was made for you." I looked at my reflection. The woman staring back was not just Ethan's mother. She was not a librarian from a small island town. She was Eleanor. She looked poised, serene. She looked whole. The dress cost more than 2 months of my grocery budget, but as I handed over my debit card, I felt no guilt. It was an investment not in a piece of clothing, but in a piece of myself I had long neglected. I bought a pair of simple silver heels and a small clutch to match. The week of the wedding, I booked an appointment at the only salon in Port Blossom. Maria, who had been cutting my hair for 15 years, gave me a knowing look. "The big day," she said. She washed and styled my graying hair, coaxing it into soft waves that framed my face. When she was done, she held up a mirror. "Eleanor," she said softly, "you look beautiful." On the morning of the solstice, as I stood before the full-length mirror in my bedroom, I saw her, the woman from the boutique, the woman in the salon. She was ready. Whatever this day held, whatever slights or omissions awaited me, I would meet them with the quiet strength of knowing I had honored myself. This act of preparation wasn't for Ethan, or for Chloe, or for her family who judged things by their aesthetic. It was for me. It was a private ceremony of self-respect before I attended the public ceremony of my son's new life. The Whispering Pines Golf and Country Club was less a place and more a statement. A long, winding driveway curved through acres of unnaturally green lawn, past sculpted hedges and beds of immaculate white roses. The building itself was a sprawling monument of stone and dark wood, exuding an aura of old money and impenetrable exclusivity. I pulled my 15-year-old Subaru into a parking spot at the far end of the lot, nestled between a gleaming black Mercedes and a silver Porsche. For a moment, I just sat, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my heart a nervous bird fluttering in my chest. Then I took a deep breath, smoothed the lapis blue silk of my dress, and stepped out of the car. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of lemon polish and wealth. A string quartet played Vivaldi in a marbled entryway beneath a massive crystal chandelier. Guests drifted past in a sea of black tuxedos and jewel-toned gowns, their laughter echoing like delicate chimes. I felt a familiar pang of otherness, the quiet girl at the loud party. I saw him across the foyer, standing at the base of a grand, sweeping staircase. Ethan. He was breathtakingly handsome in his tailored tuxedo, his dark hair catching the light. He was laughing, his head thrown back, a flute of champagne in his hand. Beside him, Chloe was a vision in white, a cascade of silk and lace. They looked like figures from a magazine, perfect and untouchable. I started towards them, my silver heels clicking softly on the marble. As I drew closer, Ethan's eyes met mine over the rim of his glass. His smile didn't widen in welcome. It tightened, faltered for a fraction of a second. It was a flicker of, not annoyance, precisely, but something like it. The look of a man spotting a minor complication he would have to manage. "Mom," he said, his voice smooth and practiced as I reached him. "You made it." "You look so wonderful, Ethan," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. I reached out instinctively to adjust his bow tie, a gesture I had performed 1,000 times before school pictures and holiday parties. He took a small, almost imperceptible step back, and my hand dropped to my side. "Thanks," he said. "You look nice." That small hesitation before the word nice was a tiny, sharp pinprick to the heart. A tall, silver-haired man I recognized from a photograph as Chloe's father stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "You must be Ethan's mother," he said, his smile polite but distant. "Marcus Davenport." "A pleasure." "Eleanor Vance," I replied, shaking his cool, firm hand. "It's a beautiful wedding. You must be very proud." "We are," he said, his gaze already shifting back to Ethan, drawing him into a conversation with another couple. "Now, Ethan, I want you to meet the Hendersons. They flew in from Palm Beach." And, just like that, I was dismissed. I stood on the periphery for a moment, a satellite whose orbit had decayed, before quietly melting into the crowd. No one seemed to notice my retreat. The reception hall was a fantasy of white and gold. Towering arrangements of peonies and hydrangeas scented the air. Each table was set with crystalline glasses and gold-rimmed china. I found the seating chart, a large, ornate board near the entrance. My eyes scanned the list. Table 1, the Davenports and their closest friends. Table 2, the the wedding party. Table 3, Ethan's colleagues from Ethelred Analytics. I found my name at the very bottom. Table 9. It was tucked into a dim alcove near the swinging doors to the kitchen, a location so conspicuously out of the way it felt intentional. A geographical representation of my status. As I approached, I saw a few other people seated there, looking as lost as I felt. An elderly cousin of the Davenports who was deaf in one ear, and a young couple who looked like they'd won a contest to be there. A woman with a kind, intelligent face and a cascade of silver hair braided with a silk ribbon looked up as I approached. "You must be Eleanor," she said, her smile genuine. "I'm Genevieve, Chloe's great-aunt, the family artist, and therefore the family eccentric." She gestured to the empty chair beside her. "Please, join us here in Siberia. The view of the kitchen staff is unparalleled." I laughed, a small, grateful sound. "Eleanor Vance. It's a pleasure to meet you, Genevieve." "The pleasure is mine," she said, her perceptive eyes taking in my dress. "That color is magnificent on you. Lapis lazuli. You know your colors," I smiled. "I know what has soul," she replied softly, and I felt a warmth spread through my chest. As the evening progressed, I watched my son. He moved through the room with an easy, practiced charm, a politician working his constituency. He clapped men on the back, kissed women on the cheek, and posed for countless photos, his smile never faltering. He was the sun around which this entire glittering solar system revolved. And I was a distant, forgotten planet, cold and dark. I kept waiting for him to glance my way, to beckon me over, to include me. The wait became a familiar, hollow ache in my ribs. Dinner service began with the seamless precision of a military operation. Waiters moved in synchronized grace, delivering plates of seared scallops and microgreens to the head table, then to tables 1 through 8. At our table, we waited. And waited. Genevieve's meal arrived first, then the elderly cousins. A young waiter finally approached me, his face flushed with apology. "Mrs. Vance, I am so terribly sorry. There seems to have been a miscount with the caterer. Your meal will be right out." Minutes stretched into a half hour. The clinking of silverware around us subsided as other guests finished their main course. I sat with an empty place setting in front of me, a physical manifestation of my invisibility. Finally, a different server brought a plate and set it down without a word. It was a piece of overcooked salmon, a few spears of limp, gray-green asparagus, and a scoop of lukewarm mashed potatoes. Genevieve glanced at the plate, and her lips thinned. "That is an insult," she whispered. I picked up my fork and managed a smile. "I'm sure it's fine. I'm not very hungry anyway." It was a lie, one of the many small, polite lies a woman like me learns to tell to keep the peace. I had taken 2 bites of the cold fish when a sudden burst of laughter from the head table drew my attention. Ethan was leaning toward Chloe, a microphone in his hand, preparing to give a speech. But before he began, he gestured vaguely in my direction and said to his new wife, his voice just loud enough to carry to the nearest tables, "See, they finally got Mom her food. Don't worry, she has a high tolerance for delayed deliveries and subpar products. Comes with the territory." A few of his tech friends from table 3 snickered. Chloe let out a high, tinkling laugh, giving his arm a playful squeeze. The sound of it cut through the room, through the haze of politeness and propriety, and struck me with the force of a physical blow. My hand, which was raising the fork to my lips, froze midair. I slowly lowered it, placing the fork and knife together on the plate. The metallic clink was a sound of finality. It wasn't just a joke. It was a diagnosis. It was the truth of how he saw me, a reliable, low-grade utility he had long ago ceased to value. Genevieve laid a gentle, warm hand on my arm. Her face was a mask of quiet fury. Did he really just... "I'm fine," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. But the words were dust in my mouth. For the first time all night, a genuine emotion pierced through my carefully constructed composure. Not sadness, but a cold, clarifying anger. After the plates were cleared, the lights dimmed and the band began to play. Ethan and Chloe took to the floor for their first dance, a choreographed routine set to an acoustic version of some pop song I didn't recognize. They were flawless. I watched from my corner table, my hands folded in my lap, my face in neutral mask. Then came the parent dances. Marcus Davenport twirled his daughter around the floor, his face glowing with pride. It was a lovely, tender moment. Then, the band leader announced, and now the groom would like to share a dance with his new mother-in-law, Mrs. Davenport. I watched as Ethan took her hand and led her onto the floor. They swayed together, two beautiful people from the same world. I waited. I had held onto this one last hope, this one small, traditional moment of connection. In my little cottage, I had imagined it, swaying to the faint music of the radio, remembering the weight of him in my arms as a baby. The song ended. The band shifted to an upbeat number. The dance floor filled with cousins and friends. Ethan was swallowed up by the crowd, laughing, spinning, celebrating. He never looked in my direction. There was no approach, no outstretched hand, no mother-son dance. He hadn't just forgotten. It had never been on his agenda. I was not a participant in his joy. I was an inconvenient footnote to it. Genevieve leaned toward me, her voice a soft murmur against the music. "Are you all right, my dear?" I looked at the swirling, laughing crowd, at the man who was once my entire world dancing in a life that had no space for me. And in that moment, the last vestiges of hurt fell away, replaced by a profound and resolute calm. I finally saw it all with perfect, unclouded vision. "I have never been better," I said, and it was the truest thing I had said all night. I stood up, my back straight. I smoothed the lapis silk of my dress, a silent thank you to the woman I had bought it for myself. I gave Genevieve's hand a grateful squeeze. She squeezed back, a look of fierce understanding in her eyes. Then I turned and walked, not ran, out of the reception hall, through the marbled foyer and into the cool, cleansing air of the summer solstice night. No one noticed I was gone. The ferry ride back to Port Blossom was dark and quiet. I stood on the deck, letting the cold, salty wind whip through my hair, washing away the scent of peonies and disappointment. The silence in my cottage when I returned was not empty, it was peaceful. It was mine. I hung the beautiful blue dress in my closet, a relic of a battle I had unknowingly fought and, in a way, won. I changed into my worn jeans and a soft, comfortable sweater. I made a cup of chamomile tea, sat at my old oak desk, and opened my laptop. My fingers, which had trembled earlier, were now perfectly steady as they flew across the keyboard. I was a librarian, a keeper of stories. It was time to write a new chapter for my own. Dearest Ethan, I am writing this in the early hours of the morning, with the memory of your wedding still vivid in my mind. The flowers were stunning, Chloe was radiant, and you looked happier than I have ever seen you. I truly wish you both a lifetime of that happiness. Your comment during dinner, the one about my tolerance for subpar products, was illuminating. It was cruel, yes, but it was also honest. And that honesty has given me a gift I never expected: clarity. You were right. For years, I have accepted the leftovers of your time, your attention, and your respect. I have quietly made myself smaller so that your world could be bigger. In doing so, I taught you that my contributions were endlessly available and ultimately expendable. I see that now. My love for you became a utility you took for granted, like electricity or running water. You don't notice it until the switch is flipped. This is me flipping the switch. Effective immediately, I am ending all my financial support. The $800 that has been deposited into your account on the first of every month for the last 7 years was not, as you assumed, from a trust your father left. There was no trust. That money was from me. It was the result of extra hours at the library, of a carefully managed budget, of foregoing my own needs and wants so that you could have an easier path. That support is now ending. I am also closing the credit card that is in my name, the one you've used for emergencies that have included new tires for your Audi, flights for weekend getaways, and last year, a designer watch that you told me was a critical networking tool. And finally, I am selling the house. This cottage, this land, which you have often referred to as your future inheritance, is my only significant asset. It is worth approximately $750,000 in the current market. I will be using that money not to fund your future, but to fund my own. You once asked me why I never traveled, why I never remarried. The truth is, I was too busy being your mother, your constant, unwavering safety net. I poured every ounce of myself into you, believing that my investment of love would one day be returned. I see now that it was simply consumed. This is not a punishment, Ethan. It is not an act of revenge. It is an act of rebalancing. It is the quiet, belated decision to matter to myself as much as I have always mattered to you. I hope your marriage is a true partnership. I hope you learn to see the people in your life not as resources to be managed, but as souls to be cherished. You will always be my son, and I will always love you. But I will no longer be your provider. Mom. I reread the letter once, then took a deep breath and clicked send. It was 3:17 a.m. The sky over the Sound was just beginning to lighten with the promise of a new day. The reply came at 11:24 a.m. Mom, what the hell is this? Are you having a nervous breakdown? You completely misunderstood a joke. It was a wedding. I was stressed. You're being ridiculously sensitive. Selling the house? That's insane. That's my legacy from Dad. You can't just do that. Chloe thinks you're acting erratically and she's concerned. Let's be adults about this. I'll come over on Sunday and we can sort this out. I did not reply. On Monday, I called a realtor. On Wednesday, a second email arrived, its tone sharp with panic. Mom, I've been calling. Your phone is going straight to voicemail. Did you change your number? This isn't funny. My lawyer says you can't sell the house without considering my stake as Dad's heir. You need to call me back now. I forwarded it to my lawyer with a note. She assured me the house was solely mine. The for sale sign went up on Friday. The final email came on Sunday, the day he had intended to sort this out. Fine. You win. Congratulations on making your point. You've successfully blown up our relationship and embarrassed me in front of my new family. I hope destroying everything was worth it. Don't contact me again. I printed it out and placed it in a manila folder. Not for a legal battle, but for my own memory. A reminder of the moment the fever broke. The house sold in 2 weeks for well over the asking price to a young couple from California who fell in love with the garden. The closing was set for the end of July. I packed my books, donated most of my furniture, and put a few precious things in storage. I bought a one-way ticket to Santa Fe, New Mexico, a place I had only ever read about, a place of dry air, vast skies, and a different kind of light. Santa Fe was a revelation. The air was crisp and smelled of pinyon smoke. The sky was an impossible, endless blue. I rented a small casita with a turquoise door and a view of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. For the first time in 30 years, my life was an unwritten page. I took a part-time job in a small art gallery on Canyon Road, a place filled with abstract landscapes and beautiful, strange sculptures. My boss was a woman named Isabel, with eyes as dark and wise as obsidian. She hired me because, she said, you look at the art like you're listening to it. My days found a new rhythm. I spent mornings at the gallery, afternoons exploring dusty hiking trails, and evenings on my small portal, reading as the mountains turned from gold to pink to deep purple in the setting sun. I made friends. I learned to cook with chilies. I learned that silence could be joyful. I was not just surviving, I was flourishing. I didn't hear from Ethan for 6 months. Then, on a bright, cold morning in January, Isabel handed me the phone. There's a young man on the line for you, she said, her expression unreadable. He says his name is Ethan. He sounds lost. My heart gave a familiar lurch, but it was a quieter, more distant echo of what it once was. I took the phone. Hello, Ethan. Mom? His voice was thin, strained. Mom, I found you. There was a pause, and I heard him take a shaky breath. Chloe left me. She said I didn't know how to love anyone but myself. She said she saw how I treated you at the wedding and knew it was just a matter of time before she was the subpar product. He was crying now, quiet, broken sobs. She was right, Mom. I'm so sorry. I was a fool. Please, can I come see you? I need my mom. I looked out the gallery window at the stark, beautiful landscape of my new life. I saw the strong, resilient chamisa bushes, the ancient, weathered adobes, the mountains that had stood long before I was born and would stand long after I was gone. The woman you're looking for, Ethan, I said, my voice gentle but clear, the one who would have dropped everything and gotten on the next plane. She doesn't live here anymore. She left a long time ago, and I have just now caught up with her. What does that mean? He whispered. It means I am not a safety net, and I am not a solution. I am a person. Her name is Eleanor. I live in Santa Fe. If you would ever like to get to know her, you know where to find me. I said goodbye and hung up the phone. I walked to the back of the gallery and stood before a large canvas, a swirl of deep blues and brilliant gold. It reminded me of a midnight sky, or a turbulent sea, or a woman who had finally learned to navigate her own waters. As I stood there, bathed in the clear, high desert light, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. The story of Ethan's mother was over. The story of Eleanor Vance was just beginning.